The World Bank Group has pledged major increases in climate finance. The new Climate Change Action Plan aims to help countries fully integrate their climate and development goals. The World Bank's Sustainable Development Regional Director, Schonberger, has paid a working visit to Kazakhstan and agreed to sit down with me for an interview. Mr. Schonberger, welcome. The World Bank Group has announced a new climate change action plan that aims to deliver a record level of climate finance to developing countries. Could you please tell our viewers about the main objectives of the action plan and why it is important now?
Sure, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with you here in Nur-Sultan. The Climate Change Action Plan was really a historic moment for the World Bank, because in the Climate Change Action Plan, first and foremost, we've committed to align ourselves fully with the goals of Paris. And in that regard, ensuring that everything we do is consistent with attaining the global goals in terms of climate mitigation, as well as supporting adaptation with developing countries around the world. Secondly, as you've referred to, we are committing ourselves to ensure that at least 35% of every bit of financing we do is directly beneficial to either climate mitigation or climate adaptation. So this is a huge commitment to ensuring that we are supporting countries in taking the steps they need to both reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but also to prepare themselves and become resilient to the potential impacts of climate change.
Now, most countries and governments in the world really occupied with responding to the consequences of the global health crisis. How do you think this action plan really helps and delivers certain sustainable pathways to the disruptions that were caused by the pandemic?
It's very timely. Countries around the world, of course, are faced with the challenge of addressing the health crisis and, importantly, determining how they will recover from this crisis, which has depressed economies around the world. At the same time, much of the response is focused on stimulating the economy with government support to businesses and to people. And there's an opportunity to ensure that as we build back the economies, we build them back better. And when we say build them back better, we mean focusing on ensuring climate change and general environmental sustainability are at the heart of that build back effort, but also that issues of inclusion, ensuring that everybody's needs are addressed, is part of that building back better.
You did mention that the action plan actually helps countries align sort of their national goals towards achieving targets of the Paris Agreement, and the COP26 is scheduled for this year. How is Kazakhstan really progressing in achieving its commitments and targets as part of the Paris Agreement?
Kazakhstan, and I'm here primarily because of the opportunity to discuss with government and other stakeholders Kazakhstan's plans for COP26 and beyond. But Kazakhstan has set a target of carbon neutrality by 2060. And while that seems a long ways off, in reality, given the important role of carbon-intensive industries in Kazakhstan's development, this is an enormous challenge. At the same time, it's a tremendous opportunity. Kazakhstan really has the opportunity to lead the way in showing how its developments in the area of digital, trade, and with an orientation towards the green economy, towards climate neutrality, can really become a business driver. And we believe that Kazakhstan is positioned for that. We really respect the commitment that Kazakhstan has made towards a 15% reduction in its greenhouse gas emissions, 25% if it receives the international support and access to technology that it's looking for. So this is an exciting moment for Kazakhstan to really start to develop leadership in this area of transition from coal-intensive and greenhouse gas-intensive economies towards the new green economy, which is the economy of the future.
Now, you did rightly mention that the Kazakh government has set a major task of greening its economy, and Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev last year announced that Kazakhstan will strive to become carbon neutral by 2060. However, Kazakhstan is one of the countries with the highest per capita greenhouse emissions in Europe and Central Asia. Where does the country really stand in terms of its transition to a greener economy?
Kazakhstan has taken some very important steps, like the introduction of the emission trading system. We had the opportunity with other partners to support Kazakhstan in putting that in place. And what's nice about the emission trading system is it creates incentives for industry, for the private sector, to look for new innovations in technologies and new approaches and reorganization of their supply chains to reflect the carbon and greenhouse gas emissions that come out of those activities. So this is an important step taken by Kazakhstan, and we're really pleased with the way that is progressing. In addition, obviously the transition from coal is going to be a major factor. Kazakhstan has over 60% of its energy coming from coal currently, and there are goals to reduce that to 40% in the coming period. But this is going to be the major challenge. At the same time, tremendous opportunities. Kazakhstan is rapidly expanding its renewable energy, particularly in the area of wind, where there's tremendous potential to expand.
Now, Mr. Schonberger, one of the other major and ambitious goals set by the Kazakh leadership is ensuring that the country becomes one of the world's most competitive economies by 2050. How conflicting is this goal with the goal of green growth? And what are some of the trade-offs in transitioning to green economy?
This is really at the heart of much of the discussion we have as a development institution with the countries we work in. And really, while we often speak of trade-offs, I think it's a bit of a false concept for the reason that the modern economy of the future is clearly going to be digital, it's global, and it's going to be green. It's an imperative, it's not an option. The question is how fast and how it happens in a way that's socially just and is inclusive of all parts of society. So for us, the question isn't trading off green versus growth. The question is greening growth in a way that is inclusive and that allows Kazakhstan to position itself as a major competitor in the industries it's currently involved in, but also in the future opportunities emerging out of the green transition.
Mr. Schonberger, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. How important is mobilizing the civil society and raising awareness of the pressing issues among the general public to ensure and to urge governments to take action? And how do we address, where do we start raising awareness among the general public of some of the challenges that we have to face and some of the changes in policy, in our behaviors that we have to make to ensure sustainable living for our countries in the future?
I'm very pleased that you asked that question, because people really are at the heart of what we like to refer to as the green transition, which is a transition towards a carbon neutral and sustainable economy. It has to be people focused. It has to be people focused for a number of reasons. First of all, because it's the behavioral change of consumers that will really drive the transition in business. As consumers increasingly demand products that reflect carbon neutrality and environmental sustainability, businesses respond. So that's the strongest incentive possible. So we really have to count on ourselves to send the signals, both to businesses and to governments, that we expect a development pathway, an economic growth pathway that reflects environmental concerns for ourselves and for our children. In addition, the opportunities for innovation will really obviously come from young people, from universities, and so we need to mobilize the education systems as well to really contribute to this green transition. In terms of the broader awareness of society, it's important that we share the science, but we share the science in a way that demonstrates to people the imperative of change, but at the same time, the positive opportunities. So much of the climate discussion has focused on the risks, and these are real, but at the same time we need to do more to emphasize the opportunities that this reflects and the quality of life that can emerge if we do this well.
Mr. Schonberger, let's talk about the environmental challenges we're facing here in Kazakhstan, and some of the major ones are freshwater supply shortage as well as deforestation. We've seen the terrible consequences of drought that we faced this summer and how detrimental it can be for food production and agriculture. What are some of the innovative solutions and technologies that you may be looking currently at that may help tackle these issues?
As you mentioned, the problems or the challenges that Kazakhstan faced this year, for instance, are challenges that are being faced worldwide. We see a tremendous increase in droughts in countries that historically never experienced droughts before, as well as forest fires and forest degradation. Kazakhstan has a very rich resource base. It has some of the largest grasslands globally, which is an important source of carbon sequestration, forests. So these are valuable resources that need to be protected. In terms of water, Kazakhstan can benefit from tremendous technologies, and we're seeing that already. Farmers are switching from flood irrigation to drip irrigation, monitoring of crop water use using remote sensing technology provides the opportunity to greatly reduce the amount of water needed to grow a certain crop. So technology is really advancing quite rapidly, and the challenge that we are discussing with government and with stakeholders in agriculture and other industries is how can we support that transfer of technology and accelerate the transition towards the use of technologies which do make it easier for farmers to continue to produce profitably while conserving more water.
Economic inclusion is one of the biggest challenges for countries in the region, and specifically for Kazakhstan. And moving further, greening the economy, how do we also address the inclusivity? How do we make sure that nobody is left behind?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, this is really at the core of the discussion we have with countries. In the case of Kazakhstan, of course, the need to diversify away from such a strong dependence on the hydrocarbon economy existed prior to the focus on climate change. It's always risky to have such a large share of one's economy dependent on a non-renewable resource that can be depleted over time. So this move towards diversification has always been there and has always been a top priority for Kazakhstan. The green economy both increases that imperative because the trade opportunities on hydrocarbon-based products could become much more difficult in the future as major trading partners like the EU consider putting up border adjustment mechanisms to tax carbon intensity of products. So it's just simply accelerated something that Kazakhstan has looked at before, which is how to move towards a more diversified economy. And in that regard, areas such as digital and other aspects and increasing the competitiveness of the agricultural sector offer good promise. But again, as you mentioned earlier, it requires really increasing the technology adaptation and certainly investing in people, in young people through education.
Now, climate change is one of the topics that sort of shifted to becoming a political dialogue or political discussion. How do we ensure in societies, especially here in Kazakhstan as well, that climate solutions don't become political tool, but are actually evidence-based and science-driven?
You know, we have to count that people, if provided with information in ways that they can understand and make their own decisions, will respond sensibly. And that's certainly our experience. As you indicate, it's very easy to politicize issues like climate change, particularly when they involve change. As people are understandably uncertain about change, it creates anxieties and concerns. And so we have to reassure people, first of all, to understand what is driving the change, but also what are some of the pathways, and ensure that people can see their own interests in those pathways, and ensure that no one is left behind in the move towards a newer green economy.
One of the biggest challenges in addressing climate change is actually mobilizing all countries and governments towards the same goal and keeping everyone accountable, and that everyone is doing their fair share. And it's very hard to do when countries are entitled to define themselves as a developing versus a developed country. And furthermore, what do you see are some of the major challenges in ensuring that cooperation really happens in this regard?
Well, I believe the countries have committed through their nationally determined contributions in the Paris Agreement. What we have to ensure is that countries have access to financing and they have access to the latest technologies. It would be unfair to expect countries, lower income countries in particular, to take on the challenges of decarbonization as well as to meet the challenges of adaptation without additional financing support, but also the opportunity to access technologies as they become available.
Now, the scientists everywhere are speaking of the pressing nature of climate change and how little time we have left until we take decisive action. What is your stance on it, and how do you see our future?
We must listen to the scientists. They're sounding the alarm call, and we all need to hear it. And they are saying we need to move faster and more deliberately. I think most recently the IPCC came out with a report indicating that current commitments only take us to 2.7% increase in global temperatures, when in fact the commitments are to 1.5%, capping at 1.5% in order to reduce the cataclysmic events that can occur with higher temperature rises. And obviously countries like Kazakhstan, which are more towards the northern hemisphere, face even faster climate change and temperature rises than other parts of the world. So there is an imperative. On the other hand, our job is really to emphasize the opportunities that emerge. Change is a reality of life. We've had it forever. Imperatives emerge. The question is, who looks at it as an opportunity, who seizes those opportunities and uses it to leapfrog themselves forward. And we believe that developing countries, because they're not so locked in as many of the higher income countries into specific development pathways, have the opportunity to pursue an innovative path and to even lead the way.
How does the World Bank support countries like Kazakhstan on their path to green economy?
Yeah. No, thank you. Well, in the first instance, we work with countries and with a broad set of stakeholders to really understand what are the primary challenges and opportunities and what are the economic growth consequences of that, and very importantly, who are the potential winners and losers in the short run. We believe very much that in the medium to long term, everyone is a winner, obviously, from reducing the impacts of climate change and reducing the severity of climate change. But there are always groups that in the transition are potentially going to suffer. So we've done quite a bit of work, for instance, in the area, regions and towns dependent on coal mining, working with the local communities, with the officials, with the companies, with the workers, on a transition arrangement, which is referred to as just transitions, to help these communities make these adjustments in terms of retraining activities, working with diversification of economic activities at the community level, as well as working directly and looking for the appropriate social safety nets to support workers and other dependents of these activities to make the transition in the most humane and equitable way.
And what are the areas that you're most excited about in supporting the Kazakh government to ensure that some of the policies are put in place that will help the economy become greener?
Well, there's a few areas that we're discussing in particular. One is, of course, how to reduce the role of coal in the energy mix, which Kazakhstan has committed to, but again, in a way that's socially acceptable. In addition, expanding the share of renewable energy, as I mentioned, solar and wind, which has tremendous potential to move much more quickly than we've seen so far. And then also, though, to focus on the areas of agriculture and forestry in terms of adapting to climate change and supporting Kazakhstan in playing a very important role in ensuring the integrity of its grasslands and forests as an important carbon sink, as well as an enhanced area of economic opportunity for the country.
For Kazakhstan to stop using coal, that also means loss of jobs for many people. How do we address that? I know you've spoken about working with the towns and societies and with communities, local communities, to address these. However, how is the argument of decarbonizing but loss of jobs is then tackled?
Overall, the experience globally is that the jobs aren't lost overall, but they're shifted from one area to another, from coal to renewable energy, for instance. The question is, will the people who work in coal be able to take advantage of these new opportunities? In some areas, such as coal, we've seen examples where the shift to renewable energy, for instance, wind farms, in the same location as coal mines, has provided an opportunity. Also, the new green economy is very dependent on certain minerals, which Kazakhstan has an abundance of for solar panels and other aspects, and offer new mining activities that are consistent with the green economy. So we believe there are direct opportunities, but it requires a very focused effort on retraining, skills building, and really supporting communities and individuals to make that transition.
Ms. Schonberger, what is the purpose of your visit, and what are you most looking forward to achieving during this visit?
Yeah, the objective of my visit is really to come to a common understanding of the challenges. I want to come away understanding Kazakhstan's ambitions, the areas of primary concern where we hope we can support either by sharing international experience or analysis, with government and with the broader set of stakeholders, and to start working on how we can be one of government's partners in making the transition in a way that is socially just.
Mr. Schonberger, thank you.
Thank you so much.